Victoria Monroe stood at the boardroom window, watching a single father pack his daughter's soccer bag in the parking lot below, the same man who'd just been threatened with termination for leaving work early. In 6 hours, she would stand in front of the board and choose between her billion-dollar reputation and defending a man she barely knew. The decision would cost her everything she'd built, or prove that power without humanity was just another kind of bankruptcy. This is a story about what happens when the untouchable meets the invisible, and both discover they've been wrong about strength all along. Hit like and drop your city in the comments so I can see how far this story travels. The elevator doors opened with the kind of whisper that only money could buy. Silent, efficient, perfect. Victoria Monroe stepped into the executive corridor of Monroe Global Industries wearing Armani and the expression of someone who'd forgotten what uncertainty felt like. Her heels clicked against Italian marble in a rhythm that had become as natural as breathing. 34 years old, self-made billionaire, CEO of a company she'd dragged from her father's mediocre legacy into something that made Wall Street nervous. She didn't smile at the receptionist, didn't need to. "Morning, Ms. Monroe," the woman said, her voice careful. Victoria gave a half nod and kept walking. The coffee in her hand cost $18. She didn't know that. Someone else handled those details. Her office occupied the entire northwest corner of the 42nd floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city like a painting she owned but never really looked at. She dropped her bag on the desk, glass, minimalist, expensive in that quiet way that didn't need to announce itself, and glanced at the calendar her assistant had already pulled up on the monitor. 9 meetings. Back to back. An investor call at 7. Standard Tuesday. She was halfway through her first email when her assistant, Jennifer, appeared in the doorway, tablet in hand, face doing that thing it did when she had to deliver news Victoria wouldn't like. "Quarterly reports are in," Jennifer said. "And?" "Operations is down 3%. Victoria's fingers stopped moving across the keyboard. 3%. "Yes. That's Evan's department." "It is." Victoria leaned back in her chair, the leather sighing under her weight. Marcus Evans had been with the company for 11 years. Steady, reliable. Boring as hell, but he got results. Until now, apparently. "Schedule a meeting," Victoria said. "Today." "He's requested 2 weeks to course correct." "Today, Jennifer." Her assistant nodded and disappeared. Victoria returned to her email, but the words blurred. 3%. In a company this size, 3% was millions. It was also a crack in the foundation, and cracks spread if you didn't deal with them immediately. She'd learned that from her father, one of the few useful things he'd taught her before drinking himself into an early grave. By 10, she was in Conference Room B, waiting. The room was smaller than her main boardroom, but still designed to intimidate. Long table, high-backed chairs, a view that reminded you how far down the ground was. Marcus Evans walked in looking like a man who'd already been awake too long. Mid-50s, graying at the temples, suit slightly rumpled. He carried a folder thick enough to be either a defense or a manifesto. "Victoria," he said. "Marcus, sit." He did. She didn't waste time. 3%. "I know." "I don't pay you to know. I pay you to prevent." Marcus opened the folder, but his hands hesitated on the papers. "We've had some personnel issues." "Personnel issues don't cost 3%. These ones did." Victoria waited. Marcus pulled out a spreadsheet, slid it across the table. "Daniel Foster. He's been with us for 6 years, project manager. Good worker. Excellent, actually, but over the past 8 months, his performance has become inconsistent. Fire him." "It's not that simple." Victoria's eyebrow arched. "It's exactly that simple. He's managing the Hastings contract. If we pull him now, we risk losing the entire account. That's $12 million. She picked up the spreadsheet. Daniel Foster, 31 years old. Degree from a state school she'd never heard of. Salary modest enough to be almost insulting. Performance reviews from previous years were solid, excellent even. Then, 8 months ago, the pattern shifted. Late arrivals, early departures, missed deadlines. "What changed?" she asked. Marcus hesitated. "I don't know. He won't talk about it." "Then make him talk about it." "I've tried. He just shuts down." Victoria studied the numbers again. There was something here, some missing piece that Marcus either couldn't see or wouldn't say. She'd built her career on reading between lines, on finding the truth people tried to bury in data. Where is he now? Fourth floor, project management. She stood. Let's go. Marcus blinked. Now? Do I stutter, Marcus? He scrambled to follow her. The fourth floor was different from the executive level, brighter somehow. More noise. People actually talked to each other here instead of sending emails from 10 feet away. Victoria walked through it like a foreign country, aware of the conversations that died as she passed, the way people straightened in their chairs. She didn't come down here often. Didn't need to. Marcus led her to a desk near the back corner, tucked against a window that looked out at another building so close you could probably reach across and knock. The desk was neat but lived in. A coffee mug with a cartoon character she didn't recognize. A photo frame turned slightly away from view. A jacket hung over the chair. The man sitting there didn't notice them at first. He was focused on his computer screen, fingers moving across the keyboard with the kind of tired precision that came from doing something too many times to count. Dark hair needed a cut. Stubble that was a day past acceptable. White shirt with the sleeves rolled up, tie loosened. He looked exhausted. Foster, Marcus said. The man's hand stopped. He turned, and for just a second, Victoria saw something flicker across his face. Not fear, exactly. Something quieter. Resignation, maybe. Mr. Evans, he said. His voice was low, even, the kind of voice that didn't ask for much. Then his eyes shifted to Victoria, and she watched him register who she was. He stood quickly, almost knocking his chair back. Miss Monroe, he said. She didn't offer her hand, just studied him. Up close he looked older than 31, the kind of aging that didn't come from years but from weight. She'd seen it before in people who carried things they couldn't put down. Daniel Foster, she said. Yes, ma'am. Your performance has declined. He didn't flinch. Yes, ma'am. Why? A pause, brief, but there. Personal reasons. Personal reasons cost this company 3% last quarter. Something shifted in his expression. Not anger, something colder. I'm aware of my responsibilities. Are you? Yes. Victoria waited, but he didn't elaborate. Just stood there, meeting her gaze with a steadiness that was either impressive or infuriating. She couldn't decide which. The Hastings contract, she said. Where are we? On schedule. Deliverables are ready for next week's presentation. Marcus says you've missed deadlines. Not on Hastings. She glanced at Marcus, who shifted his weight. Other projects, Marcus clarified. Daniel's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. Victoria looked back at him. Do you want to keep this job? Yes? Then fix whatever's broken. I'm working on it. Work faster. She turned to leave, then stopped. Something made her glance back. Maybe the photo frame on his desk still turned away. Maybe the way his shoulders carried tension like a physical thing. What's in the frame? She asked. He hesitated. Nothing important. Show me. Another pause, longer this time. Then he reached over and turned it toward her. A little girl, maybe 5 years old, gap-toothed smile, holding a soccer ball almost as big as her torso. Dark curls, bright eyes. The kind of joy that hadn't learned to be careful yet. Your daughter, Victoria said. Yes. She's the personal reason. Daniel's expression closed like a door. I handle my responsibilities. Victoria studied the photo a moment longer, then nodded. See that you do. She walked away, Marcus trailing behind her like a shadow that couldn't keep up. That's it? Marcus asked when they reached the elevator. What else would there be? I thought you'd... I don't know. Fire him. Victoria pressed the button for the executive floor. You said we can't afford to lose the Hastings contract. We can't. Then we don't fire him. Yet. The elevator doors closed. But as the floor numbers climbed, Victoria found herself thinking about the photo. The little girl with the soccer ball. The way Daniel Foster had looked when she'd asked to see it, like she'd asked him to show her an open wound. She didn't like mysteries. Mysteries meant variables she couldn't control. And control was the only thing that mattered. The rest of the day passed in the usual rhythm of power. Meetings where she made decisions that affected hundreds of lives. calls where she negotiated terms that would shift millions, a working lunch where she didn't taste the food. By 6, she was back in her office, alone. The city lights were coming on, turning the world below into something that looked almost beautiful if you didn't think too hard about what it actually was. She poured herself a drink, scotch, expensive, smooth, and stood at the window. Her phone buzzed, a text from her mother. "Dinner Sunday? Your father's birthday?" Victoria deleted it without responding. Her father had been dead for 3 years. Her mother still pretended he'd been something other than a failure. She took another sip, thought about Daniel Foster, thought about the gap-toothed little girl, thought about how easy it would be to fire him and move on. She didn't know why she hadn't. Wednesday morning started with rain, the kind of cold, persistent drizzle that made the city look gray and tired. Victoria arrived at 7:30, earlier than usual, and found the executive floor mostly empty. Good. She worked better in silence. She was 3 emails deep when Jennifer appeared, earlier than she should have been. "Morning," Jennifer said. "Problem?" Hastings moved the presentation up. They want it Friday instead of next week. Victoria's fingers stopped. "Friday. Yes, Daniel Foster's team will need to—" "I'll handle it." Jennifer blinked. "You'll handle it." "Is there an echo in here?" "No, you don't usually get involved in project-level presentations." Victoria saved her email and closed the laptop. "I do when $12 million is on the line." She found Daniel Foster on the 4th floor again, this time in one of the small conference rooms, standing in front of a whiteboard covered in diagrams and notes that looked like controlled chaos. 2 other team members sat at the table, laptops open, looking stressed. Daniel was mid-sentence when she walked in. He stopped. "Ms. Monroe," he said. "Hastings moved the presentation to Friday," she said. "Are we ready?" The room went quiet. "We will be," Daniel said. "That's not what I asked." He held her gaze. "We're at 90%. We need another week to polish the delivery and finalize the financial projections. You have 2 days. Then we'll work with what we have." Victoria looked at the whiteboard, then at the 2 other team members who were doing their best to become invisible. "Leave us," she said. They left quickly. Daniel didn't move, just stood there, arms crossed, waiting. "You don't seem concerned," Victoria said. "Would it help if I did?" "It might make me think you care about keeping your job." "I care about doing it right." "Right doesn't matter if we lose the contract. It does if we want them to renew." Victoria stepped closer. "Don't lecture me about client retention." "I'm not lecturing. I'm stating a fact." She studied him. Up close, the exhaustion was even more visible, dark circles under his eyes, the kind of tired that sleep didn't fix. But there was something else too, a steadiness that didn't bend just because she'd walked into the room. "Why do you care so much about doing it right?" she asked. "Because shortcuts cost more in the long run." "That's not an answer." Daniel's jaw tightened. "It's the only one I have." A long moment passed. Rain tapped against the window. "Friday," Victoria said. 10 a.m. I'll be in the room. "You don't need to—" "I didn't ask for your opinion." She turned to leave, then paused at the door. "The financial projections? Who's handling them?" "I am." "Send them to me tonight. I'll review them." "Miss Monroe, I don't need— Tonight, Mr. Foster." She left before he could argue. The projections arrived at 11 p.m. Victoria was still at her desk, finishing a contract review that should have been done hours ago. Her office was dark except for the desk lamp and the glow of the city below. She opened Daniel's email. The attachment was a 50-page document, detailed, methodical, thorough in a way that reminded her of how she used to work before she'd had people to do this for her. She started reading. By page 10, she'd found 3 minor errors. By page 20, she understood why Marcus had called him excellent. The work was solid, more than solid. It was the kind of work you got from someone who gave a damn, even when they were falling apart. She made notes in the margins, corrections, and suggestions, then kept reading. At one point, she paused on a section about long-term ROI. The math was perfect, but the framing was off. She rewrote it, then sat back and wondered why she was doing this instead of just sending it back with instructions to fix it. "Because you want to know if he'll notice," a voice in her head said. She ignored it and kept working. By 1 a.m., she'd finished. She sent it back with a single line, revised, review by morning. Then she poured another scotch and stood at the window. The city was quieter now. Fewer lights. Fewer people pretending the world made sense. She thought about the little girl in the photo. Thought about Daniel Foster, working on 90% when he should have had 100. Thought about how she'd built an empire by never accepting less than perfect, and wondered, for the first time in years, what perfection actually cost. Thursday was chaos. The Hastings presentation consumed everything. Daniel's team worked through lunch, through dinner, through the kind of hours that blurred into each other until time stopped meaning anything. Victoria stayed close, closer than she needed to. She told herself it was about the contract, about making sure $12 million didn't walk out the door. But there was something else. She watched Daniel work, watched the way he moved between team members, steady and patient even when things went wrong. Watched him rewrite sections without complaint, adjust projections without argument, solve problems like someone who'd learned that complaining didn't fix anything. At 8 p.m., she found him alone in the conference room, staring at the whiteboard with the kind of focus that looked like exhaustion's cousin. "Go home," she said. He didn't turn. "Almost done." "You've been here since 6 this morning. So have you." She stepped into the room. "I own the company. I'm allowed. And I'm responsible for this presentation. Your team is gone. Who are you performing for?" That got him to turn. His eyes were bloodshot, his tie somewhere between loosened and given up. "I'm not performing," he said quietly. "Then what are you doing?" "My job." Victoria crossed her arms. "At what cost?" "Does it matter?" "It does if you collapse tomorrow in front of the client." Daniel looked at her for a long moment, and something passed between them, something she couldn't name but felt like recognition. "I won't collapse," he said. "How do you know?" "Because I can't afford to." The words hung in the air, heavy with things he wasn't saying. Victoria moved to the whiteboard, studied the diagrams. "The Hastings contract, why does it matter so much to you?" "It's my job." "That's not an answer." He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't respond. Then, "Because if I lose it, I lose everything else too." She turned. "What does that mean?" But Daniel was already gathering his things, shutting down his laptop with movements that were too controlled to be casual. "I'll see you tomorrow," he said. "Foster?" "Good night, Miss Monroe." He left. Victoria stood alone in the empty conference room, surrounded by whiteboards and half-empty coffee cups and the ghost of a conversation that had ended before it started. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the windows were still streaked with water, distorting the city lights into something that looked almost like tears. She didn't leave for another hour. And when she finally did, she took the elevator down to the parking garage instead of calling her driver. The 4th floor was dark, but as she passed, she glanced through the windows. Daniel's desk was empty. The photo frame was turned toward the window again, the little girl's smile hidden from view. Victoria stood there longer than she should have. Then she got in her car and drove home to an apartment that cost more than most people made in a year and felt exactly as empty as it always did. Friday arrived like a reckoning. The Hastings presentation was scheduled for 10. By 9:30, the conference room was ready, projector tested, materials printed, coffee brewing. Daniel's team looked nervous but prepared. Daniel looked like he hadn't slept. Victoria arrived at 9:45 wearing her armor, Prada suit, hair perfect, expression that could cut glass. She took a seat at the back of the room, not at the table. An observer, supposedly. The Hastings representatives arrived at 9:58, 3 of them, mid-level executives with the kind of professional smiles that meant nothing and evaluated everything. Daniel stood at the front of the room, laser pointer in hand, and began. Victoria had seen hundreds of presentations, thousands probably. She knew within the first 30 seconds whether something would succeed or fail. This one was different. Daniel's delivery was quiet, almost understated. No flash, no performance, just clarity. He walked them through the projections with the kind of patience that made complex things feel simple. When they asked questions, he didn't deflect or oversell. He just answered. One of the Hastings executives, a woman named Sharma, leaned forward during the ROI section. "This seems conservative," she said. Daniel nodded. It is. We'd rather underpromise and overdeliver than the reverse. Most firms do the opposite. Most firms lose clients after the first contract. Sharma smiled. Actually smiled. Fair point. The presentation ran 70 minutes. When it ended, the Hastings team asked for the room to deliberate. Standard practice. Victoria followed Daniel into the hallway. That was good, she said. He looked surprised. Thank you. Don't let it go to your head. Wouldn't dream of it. They stood in silence, waiting. The hallway was empty, just the two of them and the sound of muffled voices from inside the conference room. You rewrote the ROI section, Daniel said. Victoria glanced at him. You noticed? It was better than what I had. I know. He almost smiled. Almost. Thank you. Don't thank me. I did it for the company. Right. Another silence. Then Daniel's phone buzzed. He pulled it out, glanced at the screen, and his entire expression changed. Not panic, exactly. Something colder. More controlled. Problem? Victoria asked. I need to make a call. Now? Yes. He was already walking away, phone to his ear. Victoria watched him turn the corner, heard his voice drop to something low and urgent. She stood there, annoyance prickling at the back of her mind. 5 minutes later, the conference room door opened. Sharma stepped out, hand extended. We're in, she said. Victoria shook her hand, smiled the way she'd learned to smile when cameras were watching. Excellent. We'll have the contracts ready by Monday. Looking forward to it. The Hastings team left. Victoria turned to find Daniel's team celebrating quietly in the hallway. High fives, relieved laughter, the kind of victory that came from not screwing up. But Daniel wasn't there. She found him on the emergency stairwell, phone still pressed to his ear. His voice carried up through the concrete space. I know, Sophie, I know. I'll be there as soon as I can. Just stay with Mrs. Chen, okay? I promise. I promise. He ended the call and stood there, head down, shoulders tight. Victoria cleared her throat. He turned, and for a second she saw something in his face that looked like the edge of breaking. We got the contract, she said. Good. Your team is looking for you. I need to leave. Now? Yes. Victoria studied him. What's going on? Personal emergency. Your daughter. He didn't answer. Didn't need to. Go, Victoria said. He hesitated. The debrief, I'll handle it. Miss Monroe? Go, Foster. He went. Victoria stood in the stairwell alone, listening to his footsteps fade down and away. Then she went back to the conference room and led the debrief herself, answering questions she shouldn't have had answers for, filling a space that wasn't supposed to be hers to fill. And later, when she was back in her office, staring at the city through glass that made everything look small and manageable, she couldn't stop thinking about the way Daniel Foster had said his daughter's name, like it was the only word that mattered. Victoria didn't go home that night. She stayed in the office until the cleaning crew arrived, then stayed through their shift, working on contracts that didn't need her attention and reviewing reports she'd already read twice. By the time the sky started turning that particular shade of gray that came before dawn, she'd admitted to herself what she'd been avoiding all night. She wanted to know what Daniel Foster's emergency had been, not for professional reasons. She could lie to herself about a lot of things, but that one wouldn't hold. She went home at 6, showered, changed, and was back at her desk by 7:30. The executive floor was still mostly empty. She liked it that way. The quiet gave her room to think without Jennifer's careful interruptions or Marcus's nervous energy filling the space. Her coffee was still hot when her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Thank you for yesterday. Contract saved my job. DFE, she stared at it longer than she should have. Daniel Foster didn't have her personal number. He must have gotten it from Jennifer, which meant he'd asked for it, which meant he'd thought about reaching out. She typed back, Your work saved your job. I just didn't interfere. The response came fast. Still, thank you. Victoria set the phone down and tried to return to her email, but the words kept blurring. After 5 minutes of pretending to work, she picked up the phone again. Is your daughter all right? The 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. When the response finally came, it was shorter than the others. Yes. She should have left it there, should have put the phone away and gotten back to the actual work that actually mattered. Instead, she wrote, "Good." No response this time. She waited longer than she'd admit, watching the screen like it might offer something it had no intention of giving. Then she set it face down on the desk and forced herself through the rest of her morning routine. By 9, the office had filled with its usual rhythm. Jennifer appeared with the day's schedule: 2 board calls, a lunch meeting with investors, an afternoon review of the Hastings contract terms. Normal. Manageable. Exactly the kind of day Victoria could execute without thinking. But she kept thinking anyway. At 10, she found herself on the 4th floor. She told herself she was just checking on the post-Hastings workload, making sure Daniel's team was transitioning smoothly to their next project. It was the kind of thing a CEO did. Hands-on leadership. Nothing strange about it. Daniel was at his desk, focused on his screen with that same tired intensity she'd seen all week. The photo frame was turned toward him today, the little girl's smile visible from where Victoria stood. She knocked on the cubicle wall. He looked up, surprise flickering across his face before he could hide it. "Ms. Monroe." "Walk with me," she said. He hesitated, glanced at his screen, then stood. "Of course." They walked to the break room at the end of the floor, a small space with a coffee machine that had seen better days and a table that wobbled if you leaned on it wrong. No one else was there. Privacy without the weight of her office. Victoria poured herself coffee she didn't want, mostly to give her hand something to do. "Your daughter," she said. "Yesterday. What happened?" Daniel's expression closed immediately. "Personal matter." "I'm aware. I'm asking what it was." "With respect, Ms. Monroe, that's not really your business." She turned to face him. "When it affects your work performance, it becomes my business." "It didn't affect the presentation. It affected you leaving immediately after." "I had an emergency." "Define emergency." Daniel's jaw tightened. "My daughter's school called. She was sick. The woman who watches her after school couldn't stay late. I had to pick her up." Victoria processed that. "You're a single parent." "Yes." "For how long?" The question landed differently than she'd intended. She watched him take it in, saw something flicker behind his eyes that looked like old pain learning to stay quiet. 3 years, he said finally. "Her mother?" "Died." The word sat between them, blunt and immovable. Victoria set down her coffee cup. "I'm sorry. It was a long time ago." 3 years isn't that long." "Long enough." She studied him, up close. In the harsh break room lighting, he looked even more worn down than she'd thought. This wasn't just exhaustion from one bad week. This was years of carrying weight that didn't get lighter, just because you got used to it. "You should have told Evans," she said, "about your situation." "Why?" "So he could make accommodations I don't need." "You clearly need them." "I handle it." "Do you?" Daniel's hands curled into fists at his sides, then released. "I'm here every day. I do my job. What else do you want?" "I want to know why you're running yourself into the ground when there are systems in place to help." "Because systems fail," he said, and there was something sharp in his voice now, something that cut through the careful politeness he'd been wearing like armor. "And when they fail, I'm the one left holding the pieces. So forgive me if I don't trust them." The silence that followed felt heavy. Victoria picked up her coffee again, took a sip. It was terrible. She drank it anyway. "What's her name?" she asked. "Sophie." "How old?" 6. "The photo on your desk. She plays soccer?" Daniel's expression shifted, softened just slightly. "She wants to. I can't afford the league yet, so we just practice in the park." Victoria nodded, set down the cup. "I'm moving you to a different project." His head snapped up. "What?" "The Hastings contract is locked. You're not needed for implementation. I'm reassigning you to something with more flexible hours." "I don't need special treatment." "This isn't special treatment. This is resource management." "Ms. Monroe, you're burned out, Foster. Anyone with eyes can see it. Burned out employees make mistakes, and mistakes cost money. I'm preventing that." "By demoting me?" "By giving you room to breathe." Daniel stared at her, and she could see him working through it, trying to find the angle, the catch. People in his position always assumed there was one. "What's the project?" he asked finally. "Strategic planning for the European expansion, analysis work. Most of it can be done remotely, fewer tight deadlines. I need someone detail-oriented who won't cut corners." That's a promotion-level assignment. Then don't screw it up. He was quiet for a long moment. Why are you doing this? Victoria met his gaze. Because 3% matters, and I don't like mysteries. I'm not a mystery. You are to me. She left him standing there in the break room, probably trying to figure out what had just happened. She wasn't entirely sure herself. By the time she got back to her office, Jennifer was waiting with a tablet and an expression that meant problems. Investors are pushing back on the third quarter projections, Jennifer said. Victoria sat down, pulled up the files. Let them push. The numbers are solid. They want to call this afternoon. Schedule it. The rest of the day disappeared into the usual grind of corporate warfare, numbers and negotiations and men in expensive suits who thought talking louder made them right. Victoria handled it the way she always did, with precision and zero patience for incompetence. But in the quiet moments between calls, she found herself thinking about Daniel Foster and his 6-year-old daughter who wanted to play soccer. Found herself wondering what it cost to hold together a life that kept trying to fall apart. 3 days later, Victoria was reviewing quarterly analytics when Jennifer knocked. There's someone here to see you, Jennifer said. No appointment. Victoria didn't look up from her screen. Tell them to schedule one. She says it's urgent. Her name is Sophie Foster. That got Victoria's attention. She looked up. What? Sophie Foster. I know who she is. Where? Reception. Victoria stood, walked out of her office and down the hall to the executive reception area. And there, sitting in one of the chairs that cost more than most people's monthly rent, was a little girl with dark curls and a backpack almost as big as she was. The girl from the photo. Sophie Foster looked up when Victoria approached, and there was no fear in her expression. Just curiosity and something that might have been determination. Hi, Sophie said. Victoria stopped. She dealt with corporate executives, hostile takeovers, billion-dollar negotiations. 6-year-olds were outside her operational parameters. Hi, she managed. Are you Miss Monroe? I am. My dad works here. I know. Sophie nodded seriously, like that confirmed something important. I need to talk to you. Victoria glanced at the receptionist, who looked as confused as Victoria felt. Does your father know you're here? No, he's in a meeting. Does anyone know you're here? Sophie's expression went a little guilty. Mrs. Chen thinks I'm in the bathroom. Who's Mrs. Chen? She watches me after school. She's downstairs getting coffee. Victoria processed this. A 6-year-old had somehow made it past building security, up 42 floors, and into the executive reception of a multinational corporation because she wanted to have a conversation. How did you get up here? Victoria asked. I told the security man I was bringing my dad his lunch. Sophie patted her backpack. I have a sandwich. Of course she did. Victoria looked at the receptionist. Call down to the 4th floor. Find Daniel Foster. Tell him his daughter is here. The receptionist reached for the phone. Victoria looked back at Sophie. What did you want to talk to me about? Sophie stood up, shouldering her backpack with the seriousness of someone carrying classified documents. Can we go somewhere private? This was absurd. Victoria should wait for Daniel to arrive, hand the kid over, and get back to work. That was the reasonable response. Instead, she said, Follow me. She led Sophie to a small conference room off the reception area, close enough that Daniel would find them quickly, private enough for whatever this conversation was going to be. Sophie climbed into a chair, set her backpack on the table, and folded her hands like she'd seen adults do in important meetings. Victoria sat across from her. I'm listening. Sophie took a breath. My dad is really tired. Victoria waited. He tries to hide it, but I know. He doesn't sleep good. He works all the time, and he worries about money and if I'm okay and if he's doing a good job. The words came out in a rush, like Sophie had been holding them for a while and finally found someone who might listen. He's doing the best he can, Victoria said carefully. I know, but it's hard for him, especially since Mom died. Victoria felt something tighten in her chest. I'm sorry about your mom. Sophie nodded. Me too. She was really nice. She used to make pancakes on Sundays. That sounds nice. Dad tries, but his pancakes are bad. Sophie said this matter-of-factly, without judgment. I eat them anyway because I don't want him to feel sad. Victoria didn't know what to say to that. Sophie leaned forward. My dad said you gave him a new job, one that's easier. I reassigned him to a different project. Is it because he's not good at his job? No, he's very good at his job. Then why? Victoria considered how to answer that. Because sometimes good people need help, even if they don't ask for it. Sophie studied her with those bright, serious eyes. Are you helping him? I'm trying. Why? It was a fair question. Victoria didn't have a good answer. Because he works hard, she said finally, and because I don't like seeing talent wasted. Sophie seemed to consider this. Then she reached into her backpack and pulled out a drawing, crayon on construction paper, the kind of art that belonged on refrigerators. She slid it across the table. It was a picture of 3 stick figures, one tall with dark hair, clearly Daniel, one small with curly hair, Sophie, and one in the middle, taller than Sophie, wearing what looked like a business suit and holding a briefcase. That's you, Sophie said, pointing to the suited figure. Victoria stared at it. Why am I in your drawing? Because you're helping my dad. That makes you important. Sophie, I wanted to say thank you. Dad says thank you is important. Victoria picked up the drawing, studied the careful crayon lines, the way Sophie had drawn her taller than she probably was. You didn't have to do this, Victoria said. I know, but I wanted to. The door opened. Daniel stood there, breathless, like he'd run the whole way. His eyes went to Sophie first, checking, making sure, then to Victoria. Sophie, he said, and his voice had that edge parents got when fear and relief mixed together. What are you doing here? I came to see Ms. Monroe. You can't just... He stopped, took a breath. Mrs. Chen is worried sick. I left a note. A note. I said I'd be back. Daniel closed his eyes briefly, and Victoria could see him counting to 10 or praying for patience, or whatever parents did when their kids made them simultaneously proud and furious. I'm sorry, he said to Victoria. She shouldn't have bothered you. She didn't bother me. Daniel looked at her like he didn't quite believe that. Sophie slid off her chair, walked over to her father. I wanted to thank her for helping you. Sophie, it's okay, Dad. Daniel's hand found the top of his daughter's head, rested there in a gesture that looked automatic, protective. We should go. Okay. Sophie looked back at Victoria. Thank you for talking to me. You're welcome. And thank you for helping my dad. Sophie, Daniel said quietly. But Sophie was already heading for the door, backpack bouncing against her shoulders. Daniel lingered. I'm sorry, he said again. She's persistent. I noticed. It won't happen again. Victoria looked down at the drawing still in her hands. 3 stick figures. A family that wasn't quite complete but was trying anyway. She's smart, Victoria said. Too smart sometimes. You're lucky. Something passed across Daniel's face. Agreement, maybe, mixed with the kind of bone-deep exhaustion that came from being someone's entire world. Yeah, he said. I am. He left. Victoria sat alone in the conference room, staring at a crayon drawing made by a 6-year-old who thought thank you was important. She took it back to her office and did something she hadn't done in years. She put it on her desk where she could see it. The week that followed felt different somehow. Victoria caught herself checking the 4th floor more often than necessary, telling herself she was just monitoring the European expansion project, making sure Daniel was settling into the new assignment. It was due diligence, nothing more. Except it was more, and she knew it. She noticed things she'd never paid attention to before. The way Daniel arrived at exactly 8 every morning, never earlier. The way he took lunch at his desk, working through it more often than not. The way he left at 5:30 sharp, no exceptions, no matter what was happening. She noticed the other employees, too. The way some of them looked at him, not with respect exactly. Something else. Pity, maybe, or judgment. Like his limitations were a personal failing instead of just the reality of his life. It bothered her more than it should have. On Thursday, she was working late when Marcus Evans knocked on her door. Got a minute? He asked. She gestured to the chair across from her desk. What is it? Marcus sat down, looking uncomfortable. It's about Daniel Foster. What about him? The European project. He's doing good work, but some of the other project managers are asking questions. What kind of questions? Why he got reassigned? Why he's getting special treatment? Victoria's expression went cold. Special treatment. Their words, not mine. He's not getting special treatment. He's getting a project that fits his skill set. That's what I told them. Then why are we having this conversation? Marcus shifted in his seat. Because they're not wrong to ask. Foster leaves every day at 5:30, no matter what. Doesn't stay late, doesn't come in early. In this company, that stands out. He completes his work. He does. But optics matter. Optics. Victoria leaned back in her chair. Let me be clear about something, Marcus. I don't care about optics. I care about results. Daniel Foster delivers results. If other people have a problem with his schedule, they can bring it to me directly. They won't. Then they can stop talking about it. Marcus nodded, but didn't look convinced. I'm just saying people notice. And in a competitive environment like this, are you suggesting I fire him? No. I'm suggesting you be aware of the perception. Victoria stood, walked to the window. The city stretched out below, all lights and ambition and people trying to climb higher than each other. You know what I notice, Marcus? She said without turning around. I notice that half the people in this building waste hours every day pretending to work. They show up early and leave late, but what do they actually accomplish? They send emails that could be one sentence but somehow become 5 paragraphs. They schedule meetings to discuss scheduling other meetings. They perform productivity instead of being productive. She turned to face him. Daniel Foster doesn't do that. He works his hours and he works them well. If other people have a problem with efficiency, that's their failure, not his. Marcus stood. Understood. Is there anything else? No? Then we're done. He left. Victoria returned to the window, but she couldn't focus on the view anymore. All she could think about was Daniel Foster being judged for having boundaries, for refusing to sacrifice everything on the altar of corporate expectation. All she could think about was Sophie's drawing, still on her desk. 3 stick figures trying to be a family. She pulled out her phone and typed a message before she could talk herself out of it. Your work on the European project is excellent. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. She hit send, then immediately regretted it. Too personal. Too much. She should have just stayed out of it. Her phone buzzed 30 seconds later. Thank you. That means a lot. Another buzz. More than you probably know. Victoria stared at the messages, then set the phone down and forced herself back to work. But the words stayed with her. More than you probably know. Friday brought rain again, the kind that turned the city gray and made everything feel heavier than it was. Victoria had back-to-back meetings all morning, then a working lunch that accomplished nothing except proving that men with MBAs could talk in circles for 90 minutes without saying anything useful. By 3 o'clock, she had a headache building behind her eyes, and a growing urge to fire someone just to feel productive. Her phone rang, Jennifer's extension. Yes? Daniel Foster is here to see you. He says it's urgent. Victoria's headache sharpened. Send him in. Daniel walked in 30 seconds later, and she could tell immediately something was wrong. His face had that tight, controlled look people got when they were holding panic at arm's length. What happened? She asked. I need to ask for something, and I know I don't have the right to ask, but sit down and tell me what's going on. He didn't sit, just stood there, hands clenched at his sides. There's a conference next week, Singapore. Evans wants me to go. The Asian markets briefing. Yes. It's 3 days. Important clients. You should go. I can't. Why not? Sophie. I don't have anyone who can watch her for 3 days. Victoria waited. Mrs. Chen can do afternoons, but she can't stay overnight. My ex-wife's parents live 6 hours away, and we don't have that kind of relationship. There's no one else. He said it flatly, like he'd already tried every option and knew they all led nowhere. What about her school? Victoria asked. They're on fall break that week. Friends' parents? I've asked. Everyone has their own plans. Victoria studied him. What are you asking me for, Foster? He took a breath. I need to not go. I know it looks bad. I know it affects my standing, but I need you to tell Evans I can't do it. You want me to make excuses for you? I want you to tell him the truth. Which is? That I'm a single father with no backup plan, and sometimes that means I can't do everything this job demands. The words hung in the air between them, raw and honest and completely at odds with everything corporate culture pretended wasn't true. Victoria picked up her phone, dialed Marcus Evans. Marcus, the Singapore conference, I'm sending someone else. Daniel's eyes widened. Who? Marcus asked on the other end. Williams from operations. He's been asking for international experience. Williams doesn't know the Asian markets like Foster does. Then brief him. Foster stays here. Victoria, I really think... Are we having a disagreement, Marcus? A pause. No. Good. She hung up. Daniel was staring at her. You didn't have to. I made a business decision. Williams needs the experience. That's all. That's not all. Don't overthink it. Miss Monroe, is there anything else, Foster? He opened his mouth, closed it. No. Then we're done. But he didn't leave. Just stood there, looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Thank you, he said finally. I know what that cost. Didn't cost anything. Yes, it did. He left before she could argue. Victoria sat in her office after he'd gone, staring at nothing, wondering when exactly she'd started making decisions based on a 6-year-old's drawing and a man who looked like he carried the weight of the entire world on his shoulders that were already too tired to hold it. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mother. Sunday dinner, 6 p.m. Don't be late. She deleted it. Then she looked at Sophie's drawing, still on her desk where anyone could see it. 3 stick figures. A family that wasn't quite complete. Victoria picked up her phone and did something she hadn't done in 3 years. She called her mother back. I'll be there, she said when her mother answered. Really? Don't make it a thing. I'm just surprised. 6 o'clock. I won't be late. She hung up before her mother could say anything else. Outside, the rain kept falling, washing the city clean in that temporary way rain did, making everything look new for just a moment before the dirt came back. Victoria turned back to her computer and tried to focus on work. Tried not to think about what it meant that a single father and his daughter had somehow made her remember she used to have a family too. Tried not to wonder what came next. Sunday dinner at her mother's house felt like walking into a museum of a life Victoria had stopped claiming as her own. The house in Greenwich hadn't changed in 20 years. Same cream-colored walls, same Persian rugs her father had bought on a business trip he'd probably spent drunk, same photographs on the mantel that captured moments that looked happier than they'd actually been. Her mother answered the door wearing pearls and disappointment. You came, Eleanor Monroe said. I said I would. You say a lot of things. Victoria stepped inside, handed over the wine she'd brought. Expensive, red. The kind her mother would serve but never actually enjoy. Are we doing this now, or can we at least make it through appetizers? Eleanor took the bottle without looking at it. Your brother's here. Jonathan's here? Don't sound so surprised. He visits. Unlike you, the unspoken words finished. Victoria followed her mother into the dining room where her younger brother sat at the table looking exactly like he always did. Rumpled blazer, 5 o'clock shadow at 6:30, the kind of casual wealth that came from never having to prove anything. Vicky, Jonathan said, standing to hug her. Don't call me that. Still uptight, I see. Still unemployed? I prefer independently wealthy. That's not what Dad's trust fund makes you. Eleanor set the wine down harder than necessary. Can we have one meal without you two sniping at each other? Victoria and Jonathan looked at each other, then back at their mother. Probably not, they said in unison. Dinner was exactly what Victoria expected. Overcooked lamb, undercooked conversation, and the kind of polite tension that came from people who shared DNA, but not much else. Eleanor asked about the company. Victoria gave answers that revealed nothing. Jonathan talked about a gallery opening he'd attended, some artist whose work was transformative, which seemed to be code for, I bought 3 pieces I'll never hang. It wasn't until dessert that Eleanor finally asked the question Victoria had been waiting for. Are you seeing anyone? Victoria set down her fork. No. You should be. You're 34. I'm aware of my age. I just think it would be good for you to have someone. I have a company to run. That's not the same thing. It is to me. Eleanor dabbed at her mouth with a napkin. Your father always said work couldn't keep you warm at night. Dad said a lot of things, most of them while drunk. The table went quiet. Jonathan cleared his throat. So, how's the company doing? Victoria was grateful for the deflection, even if it came from her useless brother. Fine. We just locked the Hastings contract. That's great. It is. Dad would have been proud. Victoria looked at her brother. Dad would have been drunk. Eleanor stood abruptly, started clearing plates. I don't know why you have to be so harsh about him. Because he was harsh about everything else. He loved you. He loved scotch more. Eleanor's hand shook as she stacked the dessert plates. Victoria watched her mother try to hold together the fiction that their family had been anything other than broken, and felt something that might have been pity if she'd let it. I should go, Victoria said. You just got here. It's been 2 hours. Stay for coffee. I have an early meeting. It was a lie. They both knew it. Eleanor set down the plates, looked at her daughter with eyes that had gotten older without Victoria noticing. You can't run forever, Victoria. I'm not running, I'm working. It's the same thing. Victoria stood, grabbed her coat from the hall closet. Jonathan followed her to the door. She means well, he said quietly. She means to fix something that's been broken since before Dad died. Maybe it's worth trying. Victoria looked at her brother, younger by 3 years, softer in all the ways she'd made herself hard. When did you become the wise one? Someone had to be. She almost smiled. Almost. Take care of her, Victoria said. I do. I mean actually take care of her, not just show up for dinners. Jonathan's expression shifted into something more serious. I know what you mean. Victoria left. The drive back to the city took 40 minutes, and she spent most of it thinking about her mother's question. Are you seeing anyone? As if the answer was supposed to be simple, as if Victoria's life had room for complications like relationships when she could barely find room for sleep. But as she drove, she kept thinking about Daniel Foster, about Sophie's drawing on her desk, about 3 stick figures trying to be a family. She pulled into her building's garage at 9:30, took the elevator up to her apartment on the 38th floor, and poured herself a drink she didn't finish. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Sophie wanted me to tell you she had fun meeting you. She doesn't stop talking about it. DF Victoria stared at the message, then typed back. Tell her she made an impression. The response came quickly. She makes a lot of those. Another message followed. Thank you again. For Singapore. I know what you did. Victoria's fingers hovered over the keyboard. She should keep it professional. Should maintain the distance that made sense for a CEO and an employee. Should not blur lines that were already getting harder to see. Instead, she wrote, How is she? Sophie. A pause, longer this time. She's good. Asleep right now. Soccer practice wore her out. She's playing? Just in the park. With me. Still can't afford the league. Victoria looked out at the city, at all the lights representing all the lives happening in parallel to her own. She thought about what she spent on coffee in a month, what she spent on wine she didn't drink and dinners she didn't taste. What a children's soccer league probably cost. What league? She typed. Little Strikers. It's local. Good coaches. Sophie wants to join, but registration is $300 for the season, plus equipment. I'm saving up. $300. Victoria had spent more than that on the wine she'd brought to her mother's house. She set down her phone and walked to her window, looked out at the city that had made her rich and kept her separate from everything that wasn't acquisition and profit. Then she picked up the phone again and sent a message to Jennifer. I need information on youth soccer leagues in the city, specifically Little Strikers. Registration costs, equipment requirements, everything. Jennifer responded immediately. On it. Need it tonight? Tomorrow morning is fine. Victoria set down the phone, finished her drink, and went to bed. But she didn't sleep well. Monday morning, Jennifer had the information waiting. Little Strikers was a community league for kids ages 5 to 10. Registration was $300 per season, plus another $100 for equipment, cleats, shin guards, team jersey. Practices twice a week, games on Saturdays. The next season started in 3 weeks. Victoria read through it twice, then made a decision that probably qualified as the least professional thing she'd done in her entire career. She called Daniel directly. He answered on the 3rd ring. Miss Monroe, I need to talk to you. My office. Lunch. Is something wrong? Just be here at noon. She hung up before he could ask anything else. The morning crawled. Victoria tried to focus on quarterly projections, on the Singapore conference prep for Williams, on anything that wasn't what she was about to do. But her mind kept wandering to Sophie Foster and soccer balls and the strange calculus of what $300 meant to different people. At noon, Daniel appeared in her doorway looking nervous. "Come in," she said. "Close the door." He did. "Sit." He sat. Victoria opened her desk drawer, pulled out an envelope, and slid it across the desk. Daniel looked at it like it might explode. "What's this?" "Open it." He did, slowly. Inside was a check for $500 and a printed registration form for little strikers. Daniel's face went carefully blank. "I don't understand." "Sophie wants to play soccer. This covers registration and equipment. Ms. Monroe, don't argue with me. I can't accept this." "Yes, you can. This is—" He stopped, looked at the check again. "This is inappropriate." "Why?" "Because you're my boss, because it's charity, because it's not charity, it's an investment." Daniel looked up at her. "In what?" Victoria leaned back in her chair. "In employee retention, in productivity, in making sure one of my best project managers isn't running himself into the ground trying to save up for something that costs less than I spend on a single business dinner." "That's a rationalization. It's the truth." "It's your truth, not mine." They stared at each other across the desk, and Victoria could see the pride warring with necessity in his expression, could see him trying to find a way to refuse that wouldn't hurt his daughter. "Sophie drew me a picture," Victoria said quietly. "Did she tell you that?" "She mentioned it. She put me in her family, 3 stick figures. Her, you, and me." Daniel's expression shifted. "She shouldn't have—" "I'm not upset about it. I'm just saying, she made me part of something, and I don't take that lightly." "Ms. Monroe, let me help Daniel." It was the first time she'd used his first name. They both noticed. Daniel looked down at the check again, and she watched his hand shake slightly as he held it. "Why?" he asked. "And don't tell me it's business. Just tell me the truth." Victoria was quiet for a long moment. "Because I know what it's like to have a parent who couldn't see past their own problems. And Sophie deserves better. You're giving her better. This just makes it a little easier." The silence stretched. Finally, Daniel folded the check carefully, put it back in the envelope. "I'll pay you back." "No, you won't." "Yes, I will." "Daniel, I'll pay you back," he said again, and there was steel in his voice now. $50 a paycheck until it's done. Non-negotiable. Victoria wanted to argue, but she could see in his face that he needed this. Needed to not be rescued, just supported. "Fine," she said. "50 a paycheck." He stood. "Thank you." "You're welcome." He walked to the door, then stopped. "Victoria." She looked up. "Thank you," he said again, and this time there was something in his voice that made her chest feel tight. Then he was gone. Victoria sat in her office for a long time after, staring at nothing, wondering what the hell she'd just done, and why it felt more important than any business deal she'd ever closed. The week that followed felt strange. Victoria caught herself looking for Daniel around the office more than she should, found excuses to check on the European expansion project, even though it didn't need her attention. She told herself she was just monitoring her investment, making sure the soccer registration had worked out. But it was more than that, and she knew it. On Wednesday, she was leaving a board meeting when she saw Sophie in the building lobby again. This time, the girl was with Daniel, both of them carrying shopping bags. Victoria stopped. Sophie saw her first. "Ms. Monroe!" Daniel turned, surprise crossing his face. "Victoria." They'd been using first names since Monday. It still felt strange. "Shopping?" Victoria asked. Sophie held up her bag proudly. "Dad got me cleats and shin guards. I'm playing soccer." "I heard. Congratulations." "Do you want to see them?" Before Victoria could answer, Sophie had pulled out a pair of bright pink cleats, holding them up like treasure. "They're very pink," Victoria said. "They're perfect," Sophie corrected. Daniel put his hand on his daughter's shoulder. "We should let Ms. Monroe get back to work, Soph." "Actually," Victoria heard herself say, "I was just heading out. Would you two like to get coffee?" The word surprised all 3 of them. Daniel hesitated. "You don't have to—" "I know. I'm asking if you want to." He looked at Sophie, who was nodding enthusiastically, then back at Victoria. "Okay." They ended up at a cafe 2 blocks from the office, the kind of place Victoria usually walked past without noticing. Sophie ordered hot chocolate with extra whipped cream. Daniel got regular coffee. Victoria ordered an espresso and wondered what she was doing. Sophie talked non-stop about soccer, about the practice schedule, about the team she'd be on, about how she was going to be the best player ever, even though she'd never actually played on a team before. "That's a pretty big goal," Victoria said. "Dad says if you don't have big goals, you won't get anywhere." Victoria looked at Daniel, who had the grace to look embarrassed. "I might have said something like that." "It's good advice," Victoria said. They talked for 40 minutes, about Sophie's school, about her favorite books, about the park where she and Daniel practiced soccer. Victoria found herself relaxing in a way she usually didn't, found herself actually listening instead of just waiting for her turn to speak. At one point, Sophie excused herself to go to the bathroom, leaving Victoria and Daniel alone. "She likes you," Daniel said. "She barely knows me." "She's a good judge of character." Victoria smiled slightly. "Is that what this is? Character judgment?" "Something like that." A pause. "Thank you," Daniel said. "For this, for the soccer registration, for all of it." "You've already thanked me." "I know, but I mean it." Victoria looked at him across the table, at the tired lines around his eyes and the careful way he held himself, like someone who'd learned not to ask for too much because the answer was usually no. "You're a good father," she said. Daniel looked surprised. "I try." "That's more than most people do." Before he could respond, Sophie came back, and the moment passed. But as they left the cafe and went their separate ways, Daniel and Sophie heading home, Victoria heading back to her empty apartment, Victoria found herself thinking about that moment, about what it meant that she'd noticed how good a father he was, about what it meant that she cared. Thursday brought trouble. Victoria was in a meeting with the executive team when Marcus Evans brought up Daniel's name. "The European expansion project," Marcus said. "We need to accelerate the timeline. I'm thinking we bring in additional resources, maybe have Foster collaborate with the Singapore team." "No," Victoria said. Everyone looked at her. "Why not?" Marcus asked. "Because Foster's timeline is appropriate for the scope. Rushing it compromises quality." "We're not rushing, we're optimizing." "Same thing." Marcus's expression tightened. "With respect, Victoria, this is exactly the kind of special treatment I mentioned. Foster can't be the only project manager exempt from deadline pressure." "He's not exempt. He's managing a realistic timeline. Other managers handle pressure just fine. Other managers don't have—" Victoria stopped herself, but not fast enough. "Don't have what?" Marcus asked. "A child? Is that what you were going to say?" The room went silent. Victoria kept her voice level. "Don't have the same constraints? And before you start talking about fairness, let me remind you that Daniel Foster has delivered every project on time and under budget for 6 years. He's earned flexibility. That's not how it looks from the outside." "I don't care how it looks." "Maybe you should." Victoria stood. Meeting adjourned. Victoria sat. "I said we're done." Ed. She left the conference room, walked straight to her office, and slammed the door hard enough that Jennifer jumped at her desk outside. 10 minutes later, there was a knock. "Not now," Victoria said. The door opened anyway. Marcus Evans stepped inside. "We need to talk," he said. "I thought I made myself clear." "You did. But I'm going to say this anyway." Marcus closed the door behind him. "You're making a mistake." "Excuse me?" "Foster. Whatever this is, it's affecting your judgment." Victoria's voice went cold. "Choose your next words carefully, Marcus. I've been with this company for 11 years. I've never seen you bend the rules for anyone. But Foster gets project reassignments, schedule protection, and now you're shutting down legitimate business concerns because you don't like the optics of pressuring him. His work is excellent. That's not the point. Then what is?" Marcus leaned against the door. "People are talking about why Foster gets special treatment, about what's really going on." "Nothing is going on." "Then act like it, because right now you're treating him differently than everyone else, and that makes people question your leadership." Victoria wanted to argue, but she couldn't, because Marcus was right. She was treating Daniel differently, not because of anything inappropriate, but because she'd seen what he was carrying and couldn't ignore it anymore. "I'm protecting a valuable employee," she said. "Are you?" Or are you protecting something else? Get out. Victoria. I said, get out. Marcus left. Victoria stood at her window, hands shaking with anger or something else she didn't want to name. Her phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. Everything okay? Evans just called asking about my capacity for additional projects. Victoria stared at the message, then typed back. It's handled. You sure? Yes. But she wasn't sure. Wasn't sure about any of this anymore. That evening, Victoria stayed late again, working through reports she'd already reviewed and contracts she'd already signed. She was avoiding going home, avoiding the quiet that made her think too much. At 8, her phone rang. Her mother, she almost didn't answer. Victoria, Eleanor said, are you busy? Yes. Too busy to talk to your mother? Victoria sighed. What do you need? I wanted to apologize. For Sunday. I shouldn't have pushed. It's fine. It's not. You came for dinner and I made it uncomfortable. Victoria set down her pen. Why are you really calling? A pause. Because I'm worried about you. I'm fine. You're always fine. That's what worries me. Mom, you're so much like your father, Victoria. Not the drinking, but the isolation. He never let anyone in either. I'm not isolating, I'm working. That's what he said too. The words hit harder than they should have. I have to go, Victoria said. Victoria. She hung up, then sat in her office alone and wondered if her mother was right. Wondered if she'd been running so long she'd forgotten what it felt like to stop. Her phone buzzed again. Another text from Daniel. Sophie's first practice is Saturday. She's nervous but excited. Thought you'd want to know. Victoria looked at the message for a long time. Then she did something that surprised even herself. She typed back, What time? 10 a.m., Riverside Park. Why? Just curious. She set down the phone and tried to focus on work. But all she could think about was Saturday morning, about a little girl in pink cleats, about a father who was doing his best, about what it would mean if she showed up. Saturday morning was cold and clear. Victoria woke at 7, went for a run she didn't enjoy, showered, changed into jeans and a sweater, casual clothes that felt strange on her body after a week of suits and armor. By 9:30, she was sitting in her car, staring at herself in the rearview mirror and questioning every decision that had led to this moment. She didn't do this, didn't show up at employees' family events, didn't blur professional boundaries, didn't care about 6-year-olds playing soccer in the park. Except she did care, and that was the problem. At 9:45, she got out of the car and walked to Riverside Park. The field was chaos, kids everywhere in bright jerseys, parents with coffee cups and camping chairs, coaches blowing whistles and trying to organize children who had the attention span of goldfish. Victoria found Sophie immediately. Pink cleats, huge smile, standing next to Daniel and bouncing on her toes like she might launch into orbit. Daniel saw her first. His expression shifted through surprise, confusion, and something that might have been happiness before settling on careful neutrality. Victoria, he said. Hi. Sophie turned, and her face lit up. Ms. Monroe, you came. I was in the neighborhood. Really? No, Victoria admitted. I came to watch you practice. Sophie launched herself forward and hugged Victoria's waist before anyone could stop her. Victoria froze, arms at her sides, unsure what to do with a 6-year-old attached to her midsection. Daniel reached for his daughter. Sophie, let go! It's okay, Victoria said, and carefully, awkwardly, put her hands on Sophie's shoulders. Sophie looked up at her. Are you going to watch the whole practice? If that's okay. It's more than okay. The coach called for the kids to gather. Sophie ran off, pink cleats flashing. Daniel and Victoria stood side by side watching. You didn't have to come, Daniel said quietly. I know. But you did anyway. I did. A pause. Why? He asked. Victoria kept her eyes on the field, on Sophie trying to juggle a soccer ball and failing adorably. Because she invited me, in her drawing. 3 stick figures, remember? I remember. I don't take invitations lightly. Daniel looked at her, and there was something in his expression that made Victoria's chest feel tight again. Thank you, he said. Stop thanking me. Can't help it. They watched practice in comfortable silence. Sophie was terrible, tripping over her own feet, kicking the ball in the wrong direction, forgetting which goal was hers. But she was happy, laughing every time she messed up, completely unaware that failure was supposed to feel like anything other than fun. She's having the time of her life, Victoria said. She is. You gave her that. Daniel shook his head. We gave her that. Victoria looked at him. Don't. Don't what? Don't make this something it's not. What do you think it is? She didn't have an answer. Practice ran for an hour. When it ended, Sophie ran over, sweaty and beaming. Did you see me? She asked Victoria. I did. I wasn't very good. You were learning. That's different. Dad says learning is the important part. He's right. Sophie grabbed both their hands. Can we get ice cream? Daniel started to say no. Victoria could see it in his face, but she spoke first. Ice cream sounds good. They ended up at a shop 3 blocks from the park. Sophie got chocolate with sprinkles. Daniel got vanilla. Victoria got nothing, just watched them eat and wondered when she'd last done something this normal. Miss Monroe, Sophie said around a mouthful of ice cream, do you have kids? Sophie, Daniel said, that's personal. It's okay, Victoria said. No, I don't have kids. Why not? Sophie, I've been busy with work. Sophie considered this. That's sad. Sophie, it's okay, Victoria said again, though the word sad sat heavy in her chest. Maybe it is a little sad. You could borrow me sometimes, Sophie said seriously. If you want. Daniel looked mortified. Sophie, you can't just… I'd like that, Victoria said, and meant it. They sat in the ice cream shop for another 30 minutes, talking about nothing important and everything that mattered. And when they finally left, when Daniel and Sophie headed home and Victoria headed back to her car, she realized something had shifted. She wasn't just helping an employee anymore, she was becoming part of something. 3 stick figures trying to be a family, and for the first time in years, Victoria didn't feel quite so alone. The following Monday arrived with the kind of cold that made the city feel sharp and unforgiving. Victoria got to the office earlier than usual, hoping to lose herself in work before anyone else arrived, before she had to face the questions she didn't have answers for. But Marcus Evans was already waiting outside her office. We need to talk, he said. Victoria unlocked her door, didn't invite him in. Make it quick. He followed her anyway, closed the door behind him. You were at Foster's daughter's soccer practice on Saturday. Victoria set down her bag, turned to face him slowly. How do you know that? Williams saw you. He was there with his nephew. And he felt the need to report it to you? He mentioned it, casually. Nothing casual about gossip, Marcus. It's not gossip if it's true. Marcus crossed his arms. What are you doing, Victoria? I went to watch a soccer practice. You went to watch an employee's child's soccer practice. Do you see the problem? No. I see a good employee whose daughter invited me to watch her play. I see a 6-year-old who's excited about something. I see nothing that concerns you. Marcus's expression hardened. The board won't see it that way. The board doesn't need to know about my weekend activities. They will if this continues. You're creating optics that I don't care about optics. Then you're being foolish. The word landed hard. Victoria felt her control slip, felt the anger she'd been holding back all weekend finally find a target. Get out, she said quietly. Victoria, I said get out. And Marcus, if you bring this up again, if you spread this around the office, if you do anything to make Daniel Foster's life harder than it already is, I will make sure you regret it. Marcus stared at her. Are you threatening me? I'm promising you. He left without another word. Victoria stood alone in her office, hands shaking, wondering when exactly she'd started making threats over a man she barely knew and his daughter who'd drawn her into a family portrait. Her phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. Sophie won't stop talking about Saturday. She wants to know if you're coming to her game this weekend. Victoria looked at the message, then at her door where Marcus had just been standing. She should say no. Should establish boundaries, should remember that she was a CEO and Daniel was an employee, and Sophie was a complication she couldn't afford. Instead, she typed, "What time is the game?" The response came immediately. Saturday, 2 p.m. Same field. You don't have to come. I know. But you want to? Victoria paused, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Yes, she finally wrote. I want to. She sent it before she could change her mind. The week crawled by like it was moving through mud. Victoria buried herself in work, stayed late every night, avoided the fourth floor and the break room and anywhere she might run into Daniel because she didn't trust herself to keep things professional anymore. On Wednesday, Jennifer appeared in her doorway looking nervous. Your mother called, Jennifer said. Tell her I'm busy. She said it's urgent, Victoria sighed. Fine, put her through. Eleanor Monroe's voice came through the speaker tinny and anxious. Victoria, I need you to come home this weekend. I can't, I have plans. Cancel them. No. A pause. It's about your brother. Victoria's attention sharpened. What about Jonathan? He's in trouble, financial trouble. He won't tell me the details, but I think it's bad. How bad? Bad enough that he asked me for money. Victoria closed her eyes. Jonathan asking for money meant he'd already burned through his trust fund, his savings, and whatever credit he'd managed to extend. It meant he'd done something stupid and expensive and probably illegal. How much does he need? Victoria asked. 200,000. Christ. Victoria, fine, I'll transfer it. Don't you want to know what it's for? Does it matter? He's your brother, which is why I'm giving him the money. Victoria pulled up her banking app. But I'm not coming home. Tell him to get his life together. Victoria, I have to go, Mom. She hung up, transferred the money, and tried not to think about the fact that she'd just given her useless brother $200,000 while Daniel Foster had to save up for a $300 soccer registration. The unfairness of it sat in her chest like a stone. Thursday brought a different kind of trouble. Victoria was in a meeting with the legal team, reviewing contracts for the European expansion, when her phone rang. She ignored it. It rang again and again. She excused herself, stepped into the hallway, answered without checking the caller ID. This is Victoria Monroe. Ms. Monroe, this is Principal Davies from Riverside Elementary. I have Sophie Foster in my office. There's been an incident. Victoria's heart stopped. Is she hurt? No, she's fine, but I can't reach her father. You're listed as an emergency contact. I'm what? Emergency contact. Mr. Foster added you to Sophie's file last week. Victoria processed this. Daniel had added her as an emergency contact without asking, without telling her. What happened? She asked. There was a fight. Sophie pushed another student. We have a zero-tolerance policy. Sophie pushed someone? Yes, I need a guardian to come pick her up. Victoria checked her watch. 2:15. She had 3 more hours of meetings scheduled. I'll be there in 20 minutes, she said. She canceled the meetings, grabbed her coat, and was in her car before she'd fully processed what she was doing. Riverside Elementary was a 30-minute drive in traffic. She made it in 18. The school was smaller than she'd expected, older, the kind of building that had seen better days but was trying its best. She signed in at the office, was directed to the principal's office. Sophie sat in a chair outside, legs swinging, looking small and defiant and scared all at once. Miss Monroe, she said quietly. Victoria sat down beside her. Want to tell me what happened? I'm in trouble. I gathered that. I pushed Tyler. Why? Sophie's chin trembled. He said my dad was poor. He said we couldn't afford real soccer cleats and that's why mine are pink. Victoria felt anger rise in her chest, hot and immediate. So you pushed him? I shouldn't have, but he was being mean. He was. Am I going to get expelled? I don't know. Let me talk to your principal. Principal Davies was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a firm handshake. She gestured for Victoria to sit. Thank you for coming, Miss Monroe. What happened? Tyler Matthews made some unkind comments about Sophie's family situation. Sophie reacted physically. We can't allow that kind of behavior. What about Tyler's behavior? We'll be addressing that as well. Will you? Because it sounds like Victoria stopped herself. It sounds like Sophie was being bullied and defended herself. Be that as it may, we have policies. Policies that protect bullies? Miss Monroe, Sophie is 6 years old. Her mother is dead. Her father works himself to exhaustion trying to provide for her. And some little punk makes fun of her for it. And your solution is to punish her? Principal Davies' expression softened. I understand this is emotional, No, you don't. You don't understand what it's like to be Sophie, to have everything harder than everyone else and still show up smiling. To be grateful for pink cleats because at least they're cleats. I appreciate your concern, but don't suspend her, Victoria said. Please, she made a mistake, but she doesn't deserve to be punished for defending herself. The principal was quiet for a long moment. I'll give her a warning, one more incident, and I'll have no choice. There won't be another incident. How can you be sure? Because I'll make sure of it. Victoria left the office, found Sophie still sitting in the hallway. Am I expelled? Sophie asked. No, but you got a warning. What's that mean? It means one more fight and you're in serious trouble. Sophie nodded seriously. Okay. Where's your dad? He's in meetings all day. His phone is off. Victoria pulled out her phone, texted Daniel. I have Sophie. She's fine. Call me when you can. Then she looked at the little girl beside her. Have you eaten lunch? No. Let's fix that. Fix. They ended up at a diner 3 blocks from the school. Sophie ordered a grilled cheese and chocolate milk. Victoria got coffee and wondered what her board of directors would think if they could see her now. Are you mad at me? Sophie asked. No. Dad's going to be mad. He's going to be worried. That's different. Sophie picked at her sandwich. Tyler was being really mean. I know. I shouldn't have pushed him. Probably not, but I understand why you did. Sophie looked up at her. Really? Really? Sometimes people say things that hurt worse than hitting, and sometimes it's hard to know what to do with that hurt, except push back. Is that what you do? Victoria smiled slightly. Sometimes, though I usually do it in boardrooms instead of playgrounds. What's a boardroom? A place where adults fight with words instead of fists. That sounds scary. It can be. They ate in silence for a few minutes. Then Sophie said, Miss Monroe, you can call me Victoria. Sophie's eyes went wide. Really? Really? Okay. Victoria. Yes? Why are you so nice to me and my dad? The question caught Victoria off guard. She set down her coffee cup, tried to find an answer that was honest without being too much. Because you both deserve someone being nice to you, she said finally. But you're important. Dad says you're the most important person in the whole company. That doesn't mean I can't be nice. Most important people aren't. Victoria looked at this 6-year-old who'd already learned that kindness was rare, especially from people with power. Then most important people are doing it wrong. Sophie smiled for the first time since Victoria had picked her up. I'm glad you're not like them. Me too. Victoria's phone rang. Daniel, she answered. Victoria, what happened? Is Sophie okay? She's fine. There was an incident at school. I picked her up. What kind of incident? She pushed another kid. He was bullying her. A long pause. Is she suspended? No, warning only. Where are you? Riverside Diner. We're having lunch. I'm coming. Daniel, you don't have to. I'm coming. He hung up. 20 minutes later, Daniel burst through the diner door looking like he'd run the whole way. His tie was loose, his hair disheveled, his eyes scanning the room until they landed on Sophie. He crossed to their booth in 3 strides, pulled his daughter out of the seat and into his arms. You okay? He asked into her hair. I'm okay, Dad. What happened? Sophie pulled back, told him the story. About Tyler. About the pink cleats. About pushing. Daniel's jaw tightened, and Victoria could see him working through anger and fear and relief all at once. You can't push people, Soph, he said quietly. I know. Even when they're mean. I know. Especially when they're mean. Okay. Daniel looked at Victoria over his daughter's head. Thank you for getting her. For being there. You added me as an emergency contact. I should have asked first. Yes, you should have. Are you mad? Victoria looked at them, father and daughter, holding on to each other like the world might try to pull them apart at any second. No, I'm not mad. Daniel sat down in the booth, Sophie sliding in beside him. The waitress came over and he ordered coffee he probably didn't need. This is why I worry, he said after a moment. This exact thing. Sophie dealing with kids who don't understand. Me not being there when she needs me. You're here now, 2 hours late. Daniel, I had my phone off. What if it had been worse? What if she'd been hurt? But she wasn't. But she could have been. He looked at her. You shouldn't have to deal with this. You're my boss, not my... He stopped. Not your what? Victoria asked. Daniel shook his head. I don't know. They sat in silence, the diner noise filling the spaces between words. Sophie finished her grilled cheese, oblivious to the tension at the table. Finally, Victoria said, I should get back to the office. Right, of course. She stood, grabbed her coat, looked at Sophie. Stay out of trouble, okay? Okay. And Sophie? Those pink cleats are perfect. Don't let anyone tell you different. Sophie beamed. Victoria left before she could say anything else, before she could acknowledge what was happening between her and Daniel, before she could admit that sitting in a diner with them felt more right than any boardroom ever had. She made it to her car before her phone rang again. Marcus Evans. We have a problem, he said. What now? The European project, Foster's work, is incomplete. Victoria's stomach dropped. What do you mean, incomplete? He missed a deadline. The Berlin team is waiting on projections that were due yesterday. That's not possible. Daniel doesn't miss deadlines. Well, he missed this one, and Williams is asking questions about why Foster gets preferential treatment when he can't even deliver basic work. Victoria closed her eyes. I'll handle it. How? I said I'll handle it. She hung up, called Daniel. He answered on the first ring. Victoria? The Berlin projections. They're late. Silence. Daniel? I know. I'm working on them. They were due yesterday. I know. What happened? A pause. Sophie had a nightmare on Tuesday. Didn't sleep. I stayed up with her. By the time she fell asleep, it was 4 a.m. I overslept. Missed my alarm. Got to work late and realized I'd forgotten to send the file. Victoria's anger deflated. Why didn't you tell Marcus? Because it sounds like an excuse. It's a reason. In this company, same thing. He wasn't wrong. Send me what you have, Victoria said. I'll finish it. You don't have to... Send it, Daniel. Victoria. Please. He sent the file. Victoria spent the next 4 hours at her desk, finishing Daniel's projections, polishing the analysis, making it perfect. By the time she sent it to the Berlin team, it was past midnight. She was exhausted, her eyes burning from staring at numbers. But she'd done it. She'd covered for him. Just like he would have covered for her if their positions were reversed. Just like partners did. The thought stopped her cold. Partners. Was that what they were becoming? Her phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. Thank you. I owe you. She stared at it for a long time, then typed back. No, you don't. This is what people do. They help each other. Is that what we're doing? Helping each other? Victoria's fingers hovered over the keyboard. She could end this right now. Could establish boundaries. Could go back to being just a CEO and her employee. Instead, she wrote, I think we might be doing more than that. She sent it before she could stop herself. The 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, yeah, I think so too. Victoria set down her phone, looked out at the city lights, and realized she'd crossed a line she couldn't uncross. And she wasn't sorry about it. Friday came with consequences. Victoria arrived at the office to find Marcus Evans waiting again, and this time he had Williams with him. Conference room, Marcus said. Now. Victoria followed them, already knowing this wasn't going to be good. Williams sat down, pulled out a tablet. I want to talk about Daniel Foster. What about him? His performance has been erratic. Missed deadlines, last-minute deliverables, work that requires executive intervention to complete. One missed deadline, Victoria corrected, which was resolved. By you, Williams said. The CEO finishing a project manager's work. Do you see the problem? I see me ensuring our Berlin team got what they needed. You see you covering for an employee who can't handle his workload. Victoria's voice went cold. Choose your next words carefully. Williams didn't back down. I'm choosing them very carefully. Daniel Foster gets special projects, flexible hours, deadline extensions, and when he still can't deliver, you personally bail him out. Meanwhile, the rest of us are held to standards he seems exempt from. He's not exempt. Then fire him. The room went silent. Excuse me? Victoria said. Williams leaned forward. If he's not exempt, If he's held to the same standards as everyone else, then fire him. He missed a deadline. That's grounds for termination, so do it. No. Why not? Because he's a good employee having a difficult time. We're all having difficult times. That's not special. His situation is different. Because he has a kid? Lots of people have kids. They manage. Victoria stood. This conversation is over. No, it's not, Marcus said. Victoria, sit down. Don't tell me what to do in my own company. It's not just your company. It's a board-governed corporation. And if the board finds out you're making personnel decisions based on personal feelings rather than performance, are you threatening to go to the board? I'm pointing out reality. Victoria looked between them. Marcus with his concern masking as business sense, Williams with his ambition showing through the professional veneer. She could see it clearly now. This wasn't about Daniel's performance. This was about power, about people testing whether she'd bend. Daniel Foster stays, she said quietly. And if either of you goes to the board with this, I will personally make sure your careers in this industry are over. Do you understand me? William's face went red. You can't. I can. I will. Test me. She walked out, leaving them sitting there. But as she closed her office door, she realized the damage was already done. The conversation had happened. The accusations had been made. And in a company like this, word spread like infection. Her phone buzzed. Her mother. Jonathan won't talk to me. Did you send the money? Yes. What did he do? I don't know and I don't care. Victoria? She turned off her phone. An hour later, Jennifer knocked. Daniel Foster is here to see you. Victoria's chest tightened. Send him in. Daniel walked in looking worse than she'd seen him, dark circles under his eyes, shoulders tight with tension. I heard, he said. Heard what? Williams and Marcus, in the conference room. Someone told me. Of course someone did. Office gossip moved faster than any actual work. It's handled, Victoria said. No, it's not. Daniel closed the door. You just made enemies defending me. They were already enemies. Not like this. Not openly. Daniel, I should resign. The words hit her like cold water. No. It would solve everything. Williams and Marcus back off. You don't have to fight battles over me. I find something else. No. Victoria. I said no. She stood, came around the desk. You're not resigning. You're not leaving. You're not giving them what they want. What do you want? The question hung between them. I want you to stay, Victoria said quietly. I want you to keep being the best project manager I have. I want Sophie to keep playing soccer in those ridiculous pink cleats. I want... She stopped. Daniel was looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. What else do you want? I don't know, she admitted, but I know I don't want you to leave. He was quiet for a long moment. This isn't just about work anymore, is it? No. What is it about? Victoria looked at him. This man who'd somehow broken through defenses she'd spent a decade building, who'd reminded her that people mattered more than profit, who'd shown her what strength actually looked like. I think it's about figuring out what comes next, she said. Daniel nodded slowly. Okay? Okay? I'll stay. We'll figure it out. He left. Victoria stood in her office, looking at Sophie's drawing on her desk, and wondered what exactly she'd just committed to. Whatever it was, there was no going back now. Saturday's soccer game arrived with gray skies that threatened rain but never quite delivered. Victoria showed up 15 minutes early, wearing jeans and a jacket that cost more than most people's monthly salary, but at least looked casual. Daniel saw her first, waved her over to where he stood on the sideline. You came, he said. I said I would. I wasn't sure you'd still want to, after this week. Victoria looked at him. Why wouldn't I? Because this week was a mess. Because I made your life harder. Because... Daniel, he stopped. I'm here because I want to be. Not because I have to be. Not because it's easy. Because I want to. Something shifted in his expression. Okay. Sophie ran over, pink cleats bright against the gray day. Victoria, you came. Wouldn't miss it. We're going to win. How do you know? Because you're here. That makes us lucky. Sophie ran back to her team. Daniel looked at Victoria. She's not wrong. About what? You being lucky. For us, I mean. Victoria didn't know what to say to that. The game started. Sophie's team was terrible. 6-year-olds running in chaotic clusters, mostly in the wrong direction, occasionally remembering there was a ball involved. But they were having fun, and that seemed to be the point. Halfway through the second quarter, Sophie actually touched the ball. She kicked it, wildly, in approximately the right direction. It rolled past 3 other kids and somehow, miraculously, into the goal. The parents on the sideline erupted. Sophie stood there, shocked, then started jumping up and down. Daniel grabbed Victoria's hand without thinking, squeezed it, and Victoria let him. After the game, they got ice cream again. Sophie talked nonstop about her goal, about how she was definitely going to be a professional soccer player now, about how this was the best day ever. Daniel and Victoria sat across from each other, watching her, not talking much, but not needing to. "Thank you," Daniel said eventually. "For everything, for Sophie, for the soccer, for defending me at work, for showing up. You keep thanking me. Because I keep being grateful." Victoria looked at him. "What are we doing, Daniel?" "Honestly, I have no idea." "That doesn't scare you?" "Terrifies me." "Me too." They smiled at each other, small and uncertain, but real. Sophie came back to the table, chocolate ice cream on her face. "Can Victoria come to dinner at our place?" Daniel blinked. "Sophie, I don't think I'd like that," Victoria said. Both of them looked at her. "Really?" Sophie asked. "Really." Daniel's apartment was small and cluttered and nothing like anywhere Victoria had ever spent time. The furniture was mismatched, the carpet was worn, and there were toys everywhere. But it was clean, and it was warm, and it felt like a home in a way her expensive apartment never had. Sophie gave her a tour, showing off her room with its pink walls and stuffed animals. Daniel made spaghetti that was only slightly burned. They ate at a table that wobbled and talked about nothing important. It was the best meal Victoria had had in years. After dinner, Sophie fell asleep on the couch, worn out from soccer and excitement. Daniel carried her to bed. When he came back, Victoria was standing by the window, looking out at the city from a different angle than she was used to. "She likes you," Daniel said. "I like her." "She's not the only one." Victoria turned to face him. "Daniel, I know this is complicated. I know there are 1,000 reasons why this is a bad idea, but I need you to know. I care about you, Victoria. More than I should. More than is probably smart." "I care about you too," she said quietly. "That's what scares me." "Why?" "Because I don't know how to do this, how to be this. I'm good at being a CEO. I'm good at making money and closing deals and winning, but this?" She gestured between them. "I don't know how to do this without breaking it." Daniel stepped closer. "Maybe we figure it out together." "What if we can't?" "Then at least we tried." Victoria looked at him. This man who'd already lost so much but was still willing to risk more, and made a decision. She kissed him. It was brief, careful, tentative. When she pulled back, Daniel was looking at her with an expression that made her chest ache. "We're really doing this?" he asked. "I think we already are." He kissed her again, less careful this time. And Victoria, who'd spent her whole life in control, let herself fall. Victoria left Daniel's apartment at 11, drove home through empty streets, and sat in her car for 20 minutes, staring at nothing. Her lips still felt warm from kissing him. Her chest still felt tight from the risk she'd just taken. She'd kissed an employee. More than that, she'd kissed a man who mattered, which made it worse, or better. She couldn't tell anymore. Her phone buzzed. "Daniel, you okay?" She smiled despite herself. "Yes." "You?" "Terrified, but good terrified." "Is there such a thing?" "There is now." Victoria set down her phone and went inside to an apartment that felt even emptier than usual. Monday morning came too fast. Victoria arrived at the office at 7, hoping to avoid everyone until she'd figured out how to act normal. But Jennifer was already waiting with coffee and concern. "You look tired," Jennifer said. "I'm fine." "You're never fine when you say you're fine." Victoria took the coffee. "Is there something you need?" Jennifer hesitated. "There's talk about you and Daniel Foster." Victoria's stomach dropped. "What kind of talk?" "The kind that happens when people see the CEO showing up at an employee's kid's soccer game. when she leaves work in the middle of the day to pick up that kid from school, when she personally finishes his projects. Who's talking? Everyone? Victoria closed her eyes. Great. Is it true? Is what true? Whatever's happening between you two. Victoria looked at her assistant, loyal, discreet, one of maybe 3 people in the company she actually trusted. Yes. Jennifer nodded slowly. Okay. That's it? Just okay? What do you want me to say? That it's a terrible idea? You already know that. That it could cost you everything? You know that too. So yeah. Okay. You're not going to try to talk me out of it. Would it work? No. Then why waste the breath? Jennifer stood. Just be careful. People like Williams are looking for ammunition. She left. Victoria sat at her desk, staring at Sophie's drawing, and wondered how something that felt this right could be this complicated. The morning passed in a blur of meetings she barely paid attention to. By noon, she couldn't take it anymore. She went down to the 4th floor, found Daniel at his desk. Walk with me, she said. He followed her to the break room, empty at this hour. People are talking, Victoria said. I know. You know? 3 people have asked me if it's true. If we're whatever this is. What did you say? I said it's none of their business. Victoria leaned against the counter. This is going to get worse before it gets better. I know. Williams is going to use this against me, against both of us. I know. Daniel, Victoria. He stepped closer. I know all of this. I knew it Saturday night when you kissed me. I knew it when I kissed you back. None of this is news. Then what do? We decide if it's worth it. She looked at him. Is it? For you? Yes. You didn't even hesitate. Because I don't have to. I've been alone for 3 years. I've been barely holding it together for 3 years. And then you showed up and suddenly things got easier. Not perfect, not simple, but easier. So yeah, it's worth it. Victoria felt something crack in her chest. I don't know how to do this. Neither do I. I'm going to mess it up. Probably. That doesn't scare you? Everything about this scares me. I'm doing it anyway. She kissed him then. There in the break room with its terrible coffee and fluorescent lights. Kissed him like she was trying to prove something to herself. When she pulled back, Daniel was smiling. What? She asked. Nothing. Just, you're a lot braver than you think you are. I'm terrified. Like I said, brave. They stood there for another moment, then Victoria's phone rang. Marcus Evans. Reality came rushing back. I have to take this, she said. Daniel nodded, left. Victoria answered, What is it, Marcus? Board meeting. Tomorrow. They want to discuss personnel issues. What personnel issues? You know what personnel issues. Her blood went cold. Williams went to the board. He raised concerns. They want answers. About Daniel Foster. About preferential treatment. About conflicts of interest. About whether your judgment is compromised. Victoria's hand tightened on the phone. Tell them I'll be there. Victoria, I said I'll be there. She hung up, stood in the empty break room, and realized this was it. The moment where everything either fell apart or somehow held together. She spent the rest of the day preparing. Pulled every file on Daniel's work history, every project he'd completed, every deadline he'd met, every success he'd delivered. Built a case that had nothing to do with feelings and everything to do with performance. By the time she left the office at midnight, she had a presentation that would make the board look stupid for questioning her judgment. She hoped. The board meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. Victoria arrived at 9, wearing her most expensive suit and the expression she used when negotiating hostile takeovers. The boardroom was on the 45th floor, all glass and chrome and intimidation. 12 board members sat around the table, most of them men her father's age who'd made their money the old-fashioned way and resented that she'd made hers faster. Williams was there too, sitting in the corner like a snake waiting to strike. Victoria sat at the head of the table. Gentlemen, ladies, let's get started. Richard Morrison, the board chairman, cleared his throat. We've received concerns about preferential treatment being given to certain employees. You mean Daniel Foster? Among others. There are no others. This is about Daniel Foster. So let's stop pretending otherwise. Morrison's jaw tightened. Fine. It's been brought to our attention that Mr. Foster receives accommodations not extended to other employees, Flexible hours, deadline extensions, project reassignments. We need to understand why. Because he's excellent at his job. That's not an answer. It's the only answer that matters. Williams spoke up from the corner. With respect, Ms. Monroe, excellence doesn't explain why you personally completed his work, why you attend his daughter's soccer games, why you're listed as an emergency contact for his child. The room went silent. Victoria looked at Williams with an expression that could freeze water. You've been busy. I've been thorough. You've been invasive, but since you've already crossed that line, let's address it directly. She stood, pulled up her presentation on the screen. Daniel Foster, 6 years with this company. Project completion rate, 98%. Client satisfaction, 96%. Cost efficiency, consistently under budget by an average of 12%. She clicked to the next slide. The Hastings contract, $12 million, secured because of Daniel Foster's work. The European expansion project, currently ahead of schedule and under budget, also Daniel Foster's work. Another slide. In comparison, Williams here has a project completion rate of 89%, client satisfaction of 83%, and runs over budget by an average of 8%. Williams' face went red. So yes, Victoria continued, Daniel Foster gets accommodations because he's earned them, because losing him would cost this company more than any flexibility we provide, and because being a good employee shouldn't require sacrificing everything else in your life. Morrison leaned forward. That doesn't explain the personal involvement. You're right. It doesn't. Victoria met his eyes. Daniel Foster is a single father whose wife died 3 years ago. He's raising a 6-year-old daughter alone while working full-time. He doesn't complain. He doesn't ask for special treatment. He just shows up every day and does excellent work while holding together a life that would break most people. She paused. I went to his daughter's soccer game because she invited me. I'm listed as an emergency contact because he needs backup and has no one else. I finished his work one time because he'd been up all night with a sick child and made a human mistake. None of this compromises my judgment. All of it makes me a better leader. Or it makes you compromised, Williams said. Rumor has it you're romantically involved with him. The room went deadly quiet. Victoria looked at Williams for a long moment. Then she looked at the board. Yes, she said. Morrison's eyes widened. You're admitting to a relationship with an employee. I'm admitting to caring about a good man who happens to work for this company. I'm admitting that for the first time in 10 years, I've met someone who reminds me that business isn't the only thing that matters. I'm admitting that I'm human. This is a conflict of interest, Williams said. No. A conflict of interest would be promoting him unfairly, giving him raises he hasn't earned, protecting him from consequences he deserves. I've done none of those things. What I have done is recognize excellence and provide reasonable accommodations for an employee balancing extraordinary circumstances. Morrison shook his head. Victoria, we respect your leadership, but this crosses a line. What line? The line that says I'm only allowed to be a CEO, that I can't also be a person? The line that separates professional from personal. That line is arbitrary and outdated. You want to know the truth? The absolute truth? Victoria leaned forward. Daniel Foster makes me better. Better at this job. Better at seeing people instead of just resources. Better at understanding that profit without humanity is just greed with a spreadsheet. She straightened. So yes, I care about him. Yes, I'm involved with him. And if that's a problem, then you have a choice to make. Fire me and lose the CEO who tripled your stock value in 3 years, or accept that I'm capable of running this company while also having a life outside of it. The silence was absolute. Finally, Morrison spoke. You're putting us in an impossible position. No, I'm making it simple. Trust my judgment or don't. But don't pretend this is about Daniel Foster's performance. It's about whether you believe women can be both powerful and human. Morrison and the other board members exchanged looks. We need to discuss this privately, Morrison said. Fine, I'll wait outside. Victoria left the boardroom, walked to the elevator, and made it to her office before her hands started shaking. She'd just bet her entire career on a man she'd known for 2 months and a 6-year-old who drew stick figures. Her phone buzzed. Daniel. How did it go? She stared at the message, unsure how to answer. I don't know yet, she finally typed, but I told them the truth, which was, that you matter more than their approval. A long pause. Victoria, I know. We'll talk later. She set down her phone just as Jennifer knocked. They want you back, Jennifer said. Victoria took a breath, stood, and walked back to the boardroom like she was walking to her own execution. The board members were sitting exactly as she'd left them. Morrison gestured to her chair. Sit down, Victoria. She sat. Morrison steepled his fingers. We've discussed your situation, and we've come to a decision. Victoria waited. We're not going to terminate you. She exhaled. However, Morrison continued, there are conditions. Daniel Foster needs to be transferred to a different department, one where you're not in his direct reporting chain. That's acceptable. And you need to be transparent about the relationship. No hiding it. No pretending it doesn't exist. If people ask, you answer honestly. I can do that. Finally, and this is non-negotiable, if there's any indication that this relationship is affecting your performance or creating workplace issues, we revisit this conversation. Victoria nodded. Understood. Morrison leaned back. We're taking a risk on you, Victoria. Don't make us regret it. I won't. She left the boardroom, made it to the elevator, and finally let herself feel the relief. She'd kept her job, kept Daniel, kept everything that mattered. But as she rode down to the 4th floor, she realized the hard part wasn't over. The hard part was just beginning. She found Daniel at his desk, looking up the moment he saw her. Conference room, she said. Now. He followed her, closed the door behind them. Well, he asked. They're transferring you to a different department, out of my direct chain. Okay. And we have to be transparent, no hiding. If people ask, we answer. I can live with that. Daniel, this is going to be hard. People are going to talk. Some will support us, most won't. Your career might suffer. Mine definitely will. He stepped closer. Are you trying to talk me out of this? I'm trying to make sure you understand what you're signing up for. I understand. I'm doing it anyway. He took her hand. I've been alone for 3 years, Victoria. I've been barely surviving for 3 years. And then you walked into my life and suddenly I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living. So yeah, this is going to be hard, but it's worth it. Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. She never cried, but she was crying now. I don't know how to do this, she whispered. Neither do I. We'll figure it out together. He kissed her, and she let herself believe him. The next few weeks were exactly as hard as Victoria had predicted. The office gossip hit fever pitch. Some people congratulated them. Most just stared. Williams glared from across the room in meetings, clearly furious that his attempt to destroy her had failed. But through it all, Daniel stayed steady, and Sophie stayed bright. And slowly, Victoria started to understand what it felt like to have a family again. She started leaving work at reasonable hours, started saying no to weekend meetings, started showing up to Sophie's soccer games not because she had to, but because she wanted to. One Saturday afternoon, 3 months after the board meeting, Victoria sat on the sidelines watching Sophie chase a soccer ball with the kind of joy that didn't care about winning or losing. Daniel sat beside her, their shoulders touching. You happy? He asked. Victoria thought about it, really thought about the job she still had, the man beside her, the little girl who'd decided Victoria was family. Yeah, she said, I think I am. Good. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Sophie scored a goal, actually scored, not by accident this time, and came running over, all sweat and excitement. Did you see? She asked Victoria. I saw. That was amazing. I'm getting better. You are. Sophie looked between them, then said, Can Victoria come home for dinner again? Daniel looked at Victoria. Can she? Victoria smiled. Yes, she can. That evening, in Daniel's small apartment that still felt more like home than anywhere else, Victoria helped make dinner while Sophie talked nonstop about soccer and school and everything else 6-year-olds found important. After dinner, they watched a movie. The same one they'd tried to watch months ago, but never finished. This time, they made it to the end. Sophie fell asleep halfway through, curled up between them. Daniel carefully moved her to her bedroom. When he came back, Victoria was standing by the window again, looking out at the city. You okay? He asked. I was just thinking. About what? About my father? about how he used to say work was all that mattered, that everything else was a distraction. You don't believe that anymore? Victoria turned to face him. No, I think he had it backwards. Work is what you do, but this? She gestured around the apartment at the life Daniel had built. This is why you do it. Daniel smiled. When did you get so wise? When I met a single father who taught me that strength isn't about never needing help. It's about knowing when to ask for it. I never asked. You didn't have to. Sophie did it for you. With that drawing. With that drawing. Daniel pulled her close. I love you, you know. It was the first time either of them had said it. Victoria felt the words land in her chest, warm and terrifying and perfect. I love you too, she said. They stood there in the quiet, holding each other, and Victoria realized something she'd never understood before. Real power wasn't about control. It wasn't about winning or acquiring or climbing higher than everyone else. Real power was about connection, about letting yourself be vulnerable enough to love and be loved, about showing up not because you had to, but because you wanted to, about finding strength in other people instead of just yourself. Her phone buzzed. Her mother. Dinner tomorrow? I'd like to meet him. And Sophie. Victoria stared at the message, then showed it to Daniel. You told her, he asked. Last week. I figured it was time. How did she take it? Better than I expected. She said it was about time I let someone in. Daniel smiled. Smart woman. She has her moments. Victoria typed back, 6 o'clock. We'll be there. The next evening, driving to Greenwich with Daniel and Sophie, Victoria felt nervous in a way she hadn't since she was 16. Your mom is going to like me, right? Sophie asked from the back seat. She's going to love you, Victoria said. How do you know? Because I love you. Sophie beamed. Eleanor Monroe answered the door wearing the same pearls, but a different expression, softer somehow, more open. Victoria, she said. Then she looked at Daniel. You must be Daniel. Mrs. Monroe, thank you for having us. Call me Eleanor. She looked down at Sophie. And you must be Sophie. Hi, Sophie said. I like your house. It's really big. Eleanor laughed. Actually, laughed. It is, isn't it? Would you like to see the garden? You have a garden? Come on, I'll show you. She led Sophie away, leaving Victoria and Daniel standing in the foyer. Jonathan appeared from the living room. Vicky brought a boy home. This I had to see. Shut up, Jonathan. Is this him? The one who's got you all? Yes, this is Daniel. Daniel, my useless brother Jonathan. Jonathan shook Daniel's hand. Don't listen to her. I'm very useful. I'm just choosy about when. They had dinner in the formal dining room, and it was nothing like Victoria's last visit. Eleanor asked Daniel about his work, about Sophie, about his life. Jonathan told terrible jokes that made Sophie laugh, and Victoria sat there watching her family actually be a family and felt something settle in her chest. After dinner, Eleanor pulled Victoria aside while Jonathan showed Sophie his collection of vintage guitars. I like him, Eleanor said. I'm glad. He's good for you. I can see it. He is. Eleanor touched Victoria's arm. Your father would have been wrong about him. Dad was wrong about a lot of things. He was, but he would have been especially wrong about this. Eleanor smiled. You're happier than I've seen you in years. I am. Good. Don't let it go. I won't. They stood together, watching through the doorway as Daniel and Sophie and Jonathan laughed about something. A family. Imperfect and complicated and absolutely right. 3 months later, Victoria stood in front of the bathroom mirror, staring at a positive pregnancy test. Her hands were shaking. She'd been careful. They'd been careful, but apparently not careful enough. She heard Daniel in the kitchen making breakfast, Sophie singing off-key in her room. Victoria looked at the test again, then at herself in the mirror. She was terrified. She was also unexpectedly happy. She walked into the kitchen. Daniel looked up, saw her expression. What's wrong? He asked. Victoria held out the test. Daniel stared at it, looked at her, looked at the test again. Are you? Yes. Yes. He set down the spatula very carefully. Okay. That's all you have to say? Okay? I mean, I have a lot to say, but I'm trying not to freak out until I know how you're feeling. Victoria laughed, slightly hysterical. I don't know how I'm feeling. Are you happy? I think so. Scared? Definitely. Yeah, me too. They stood there in the kitchen, both processing. Finally, Daniel said, We can do this. Together. Can we? We've done harder things. Have we? You faced down your board of directors. I raised Sophie alone for 3 years. We can handle this. Victoria looked at him. This man who'd taught her what strength actually looked like, who'd shown her that asking for help wasn't weakness, and made a decision. Okay, she said. We can do this. Yeah? Yeah. He kissed her, and she kissed him back, and through the wall they heard Sophie singing, completely oblivious to the fact that her family was about to get bigger. Sophie found out 2 weeks later. They sat her down in the living room, both nervous. Sophie, Daniel said, we have something to tell you. Are you getting married? Victoria and Daniel looked at each other. We haven't talked about that yet, Daniel said. You should. That's what people do when they love each other. We'll discuss it, but that's not what we wanted to tell you. Sophie waited. Victoria's going to have a baby, Daniel said, which means you're going to be a big sister. Sophie's eyes went wide. Really? Really? When? In about 7 months. Sophie jumped up, ran to Victoria, hugged her waist. I'm going to be the best big sister ever. Victoria put her hand on Sophie's head, felt something warm spread through her chest. I know you will. That night, after Sophie was asleep, Daniel and Victoria sat on the couch. She took that well, Victoria said. She did. Daniel? Yeah? What she said? About getting married. He looked at her. What about it? Is that something you want? Is it something you want? Victoria thought about it. About Sophie's stick figure drawing still on her desk at work. About the family they'd accidentally built. About what it meant to commit to someone not just romantically, but completely. Yes, she said. I think it is. Daniel smiled, pulled a small box from his pocket. Victoria stared at it. You already? I bought it 2 months ago. I was just waiting for the right time to ask. And the right time is now? When I'm pregnant and emotional and probably going to cry? Seems perfect to me. He opened the box. Inside was a simple ring, nothing like the ostentatious jewelry Victoria usually wore, perfect in its simplicity. Victoria Monroe, Daniel said. Will you marry me? Yes, she said, already crying. Yes. He slid the ring onto her finger, kissed her, and held her while she cried happy tears for the first time in her life. 6 months later, Victoria stood in a small courthouse wearing a simple dress, Sophie beside her in pink, because of course Sophie insisted on pink, and married Daniel Foster in front of a judge, her mother, her brother, and a handful of friends. It wasn't the kind of wedding anyone expected a billionaire CEO to have. It was better. 3 months after that, Victoria gave birth to a son. They named him Thomas after Daniel's father. Sophie insisted on being in the delivery room, insisted that her baby brother needed to see his big sister first. And Daniel let her because he'd learned that sometimes the best thing you could do was let love be messy and imperfect and real. Victoria held Thomas for the first time and understood, finally, what her father had never learned. That work was important. Money was important. Success was important. But none of it mattered if you had no one to share it with. 2 years later, Victoria stepped down as CEO. She stayed on the board, stayed involved, but gave the day-to-day operations to someone else. Someone who could give it the kind of attention she no longer wanted to give. Because she had other priorities now. Like watching Sophie's soccer games. Like teaching Thomas to walk. Like having dinner with her husband every night and actually tasting the food. Like being present for a life that had taken her 36 years to build, but only 2 years to understand. One Saturday afternoon, she sat in the park watching Sophie, now 8 years old, play soccer with her team. Thomas was on the grass beside her, chasing butterflies with the kind of determination that reminded Victoria of herself. Daniel sat beside her, hand in hers. You happy? He asked. It was the same question he'd asked years ago. Victoria's answer was different now. Completely, she said, and she meant it. Because she'd learned that real power wasn't about how much you controlled. It was about what you chose to hold on to. And she'd chosen this messy, imperfect, absolutely perfect family. This life that didn't look anything like what she'd planned, but looked exactly like what she needed. Sophie scored a goal. Thomas cheered even though he didn't understand what was happening. Daniel squeezed Victoria's hand, and Victoria sat there in the grass, in the sunshine, surrounded by the people who'd taught her that being strong meant letting yourself be vulnerable, and finally understood what it meant to be whole. Not because she had all the answers, but because she'd finally learned to ask the right questions. Not, how high can I climb, but who do I want beside me? Not, what can I acquire, but what matters enough to hold? Not, how much can I control, but what am I willing to let change me? The answers had led her here, to this park, to this family, to this life. And for the first time since her father had died, Victoria Monroe felt like she'd finally won something that actually mattered.